Grüß, willkommen in einem meiner Video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 74 of my game system design series. In this video I'll cover updating old figure gaming rules. Why would you want to do this and how should you do this? No matter how much you may have liked a set of rules from the past, fashions change and game systems do develop. As a result, when you go back to an old set of rules, you'll often be dismayed at several aspects of the rules. Of course, if you've been regularly playing a set of rules for the last 30 years, then that will not be the case. It's only an issue when you learn and play a set of rules, then stop playing them for 10 or 20 years, and then come back to them. If you are a new figure gaming player, it's very unlikely you'll ever bother, so this problem, if you can call that, only exists for us old-timers. Before I proceed with the video, I want to exclude cases where you may just not like certain aspects of the rules. The scale's not your sweet spot, the game system is not your style, the pace of the game is not to your liking, and so on. These are personal preference issues, and while valid, are dependent on the individual. There are many rules I don't like, yet they are very popular. I normally don't like them for very subjective and personal reasons, such as in my case, skirmish rules, or rules such as Flames of War. I'll give each a try, but I have no particular enthusiasm for those style of rules. What I'm trying to identify are rules which you may have liked in the past, but today you feel are outdated, or have some other issue which makes them difficult to get back into. My personal classic example of this was the old Bruce Taylor's Corps Commander set of rules. When they first came out in the mid-1980s, I was totally hooked. I had issues with the rules, but always believed these were due to a lack of understanding of the rules rather than any other issue, and had many imperfect and incorrect games as a result, but nonetheless I still had a lot of fun. When I left the hobby and came back in 2013, I instantly gravitated to these rules and was shocked at how difficult they were to play. I had a lot of choices today, while back in 1986, this was the only game in town at that scale. I then decided to update the Corps Commander set of rules in order to make them work better for today. That was the start of a 3-year journey. I initially tried to make some simple changes which I thought would simplify the rules so they could easily be played. This attempt totally failed. My next attempt was based on retaining the rules exactly as they were printed in 1986, but to reformat the rules, add additional cross-referencing, new tables, and an extensive examples guide. This took a lot of work, but when I finished, I knew the rules backwards, but was still finding it very tiring to play, even a half a dozen game turns. The rules were so incredibly complex and detailed, if you tried to play the game correctly, you were doing a lot of busy work with very little happening on the playing area. It was then I discovered these rules were best played with very small force mixes, which did work very well, ideally a regiment per side. This is a common issue with many older rules. They are often sold as a way to have a large-scale game or battle, but the reality was they were designed for very small force mixes. You could still have large battles, but the game would span days and probably require multiple players on each side. The WRG Napoleon rules are another good example. They were designed for 1,000-point force mixes for competition play, which means you likely had a force mix of 12 to 18 units, primarily infantry. This worked, and I admit worked very well, but certainly did not allow you to refight any type of substantial battle beyond a divisional size per side. It was then I decided to simplify the Corps Commander game system as much as possible while retaining all the detail. This took over a year, and the result was gameplay sped up perhaps 10, maybe if you're lucky 20%, which was good, but did not give me the ability to go beyond a regiment per side without the game taking more than a day of play. This did teach me a valuable lesson. When trying to make minimal changes to speed up play, don't expect to get a major effect or improvement. My final attempt at upgrading Corps Commander was to reduce the complexity in the game system while trying to stay true to the objective of the original set of rules. This took less time, perhaps 6 to 5 months or 5 to 6 months, but the results were reasonably successful. I could field several regiments or a small division per side and get a game completed within a 6 to 8 hour period. Just, if you include setup and pack up, it's a full day. Unfortunately for me, after spending 3 years on this project, I was really sick of the sight of the rules and moved over to another set of rules, LWRS, and finally Neuschöpfung, which were dramatically more simpler game systems and gave me what I wanted without so much pain. But that is my personal situation, and if the budding game designer approached this type of project correctly, they should be able to get a usable result within a few months, that is, upgrading an old set of rules. Before I go into a possible methodology, you need to identify the reason why you want to simplify or revamp a set of rules, specifically an old set of rules. If you wish to revamp a recent set of rules, you are more likely more in the area of house rule or tweaks rather than redesigning the rules. Or if you're designing your own rules using an existing set of rules as a base, then you're not really updating it. I'll not cover these topics, and generally apart from the few house rules, I tend to avoid making attempt at any changing any recent set of rules. Recently created rules are typically using state-of-the-art game systems, so updating a game system doesn't get you the same bang for the buck, and it's not viable, as this falls in the area of personal preference rather than actually updating a set of old rules to play quicker and use more up-to-date state-of-the-art game systems. This does neatly segue into the main task of updating rules, replacing dated game systems with more modern game systems. This is one possible reason why you may wish to update a set of old rules, and it's a good reason. Older rules tend to be filled with reaction tests and testing. While in some cases these are unavoidable, they can act as a major drag on a game if performed too much. The ideal reaction test, or these days many rules call it quality test, is one which is required when a unit suffers casualties, loses a melee, attempts to rally, or other similar non-command driven reaction test reasons. These type of tests are still available today. Older rules often use reaction tests to simulate command control. A test to see if someone can charge, a test to see if someone can pursue, a test to see if a unit can advance or stay put, etc. Many of these factors can be contained in a simpler command control system, such as DBMM's PIP system or something similar to that. As a general rule, it's always better to use a command control system rather than a reaction test system for these functions. The main reason is it means the player has to make a decision. Shall I spend command points here or there? And once the decision is made, it's over. A reaction test system means many players' decisions don't mean anything. A player can decide to do something and then has to spin a dice to see if it will occur. This works, but does encourage a player to do nothing or very little. Other game systems update ideas could be the use of umpires or order writing. Other areas to look at is sequence of play. Often older rules would create a very complex sequence of play to somehow reproduce simultaneous movement. While a complex sequence of play is not by itself an issue, if you have to remember something from a previous phase to conduct something in the current phase, you limit the scalability of your rules. Charging in the WRG Napoleonic rules is a good example. The steps are daunting, with reaction tests, initial moves at a specific phase, then reactions to charging in another phase, followed by final moves in yet another phase. With small games, this is absolutely not an issue, but for larger games, keeping track of this process represents a lot of unnecessary effort, or if it's not unnecessary, boring effort. In this case, the player makes a decision, and actions resulting can span a significant amount of time. A player does not get the dopamine hit from making a good decision in this case. You need to give a player immediate gratification for their decisions. There are many other reasons why you would like to update an old game system, and I'm not going to bother to cover all the possible examples of old systems which could be updated, but this is a good reason to update an older set of rules. The next reason could be related to the type of game. You may wish to command more than 18 units and complete a game within 4 hours. This moves into the area of simplification, or better put, quick play or speeding up play. The easiest way of increasing the size of your force mix and keeping the game to a reasonable time frame is to speed up play using simplification and the utilization of systems which speed up play as much as possible. If you convert your 18 unit per side rules into a quick play set of rules, you could possibly now command 36 or more units for a standard length game. I have to admit you can't go overboard here, as typically each side should have no more than 50 to 75 elements each. Otherwise, the sheer logistics of moving all those elements will kill the game as effectively as cumbersome or old game systems. Grouping elements into units helps, but it's not a linear advantage. Fielding 75 units of 4 elements is not the same as 75 elements, for example. I'm uncertain where the sweet spot is, but my general rule is for a 12 game turn game, each player should field no more than 50 elements per game turn on average. This gives a game length of about 6 hours, not including setup, lunch or pack-up time. When I use the term average, I am including reinforcements arriving during the game, if those rules require that. Both players could start with 50 elements or units total and have no reinforcements. That is 50 elements or units each and have no reinforcements. This is typical for ancients. However, for Napoleonics, American Civil War, World War I, World War II, and Cold War, reinforcements are highly likely. This chart shows you some examples, with the first example showing a player with 50 elements. That's an individual player with 50 elements for the entire game. The second shows 25 elements in the first quarter of the game. That is, the game length is divided into 4 parts. The first part is the first quarter, 50 in the second quarter, and the third quarter, and 75 in the fourth quarter. In this example, the players received reinforcements in the second and fourth quarter. The final example shows you 25 elements in the first 2 quarters, followed by reinforcements in the third and fourth quarter, totaling 100 elements. The most typical example requires each player possessing 75 elements, as the last example is rather risky for most games. A player will be outnumbered for too long and too much if they select that. For those interested, I estimate halving the number of elements or units will reduce the gameplay by half, to 3 hours in this case. In this case, setup and pack-up time is quicker as well, and lunch is not included in this span of time, because you've ended the game before lunch starts. You could also reduce the number of game turns. I should note there is an error factor which is plus or minus 1/3 game length, so this could range from 2 to 4 hours depending on the game, player speed and skill. Based on my experience, so it's not empirical, let's see what happens when we field multi-element units for our 12 game turn game spanning 6 hours. Note, depending on other factors, this could range from 4 to 8 hours, but the average time tends to be 6 hours. For each increase in unit size of one element, the number of elements can increase by about 33%. If we're using units of 2 elements, we can field 34 units and 67 elements. At 3 elements per unit, it moves to 28 units. That means the units have reduced, but we are now fielding 84 elements, more elements. I tend to find this is optimal, but you can move up to a 4 element per unit option as well if you so desire. The issue with increasing elements per unit is a physical issue. At 4 elements per unit, a player could be fielding 200 elements at the end of the game, which is a large physical effort. The rules themselves will also have some impact, but once players are experienced, the differences tend to be minor. When players are inexperienced, the difference will be very significant. A complex set of rules will always take a lot of time per game turn if players are inexperienced. This will dramatically reduce as players become more experienced. If the set of rules are simple, this is not so much of a negative. I should also note that multi-element units take up real estate, so if you don't keep the number of elements down, you'll need to grow the playing area accordingly. Deploying 100 elements in 25 units takes up much more space than deploying 50 elements in 50 units, for example. The other area you may wish to update for your old set of rules is the scenarios. Optimally, you want a game within some reasonable period of time with a robust victory condition. Playing a competition-size army on a small playing area allows you to base victory on losses. As everyone is already in range of each other, combat will occur irrespective of what a player may wish to do, so some casualties will always result, which gives us a game result, whether we want it or not. However, competition games are very small, so if you want something larger, you need to think about putting in some good victory conditions. Objective-based victory conditions are optimal, but whatever you select, this is an area of improvement which could scrub up an old set of rules very nicely. You could also try your hand at updating terrain placement, but from experience I find this is very hard, and I personally have no optimal system apart from the one player places the terrain and the other player selects the side they wish to play from type scenario or system. This could be an area of improvement if you wish to update an old set of rules with a terrain placement system which is cumbersome or simply doesn't work. So let's look at our summary. I'm certain there are other improvements or update you could consider, but putting scenarios and terrain placement to one side, it's all about updating game system and simplification and speed up of play. Now we come to the next issue to deal with. Updating game systems and ramping up gameplay can result in some extensive changes. From experience, this has become a root and branch type change, a total rewrite of the bulk of the rules. The question needs to be asked, what will remain from the old set of rules? If you don't care what remains, you are better off simply creating a whole new set of rules and not worrying about updating anything. On the other hand, if you do care, what do you care about and why? As most basic old rules have people who use to play them, you have a potential audience which would be interested in looking at your updated set of rules. In order to keep those old players or older players on side, you need to remain true to the core theme of the older rules. This normally means retaining the game scale and anything required to allow those older players to use their older armies. Scale, army list, point systems need to remain, if not identical, reasonably much the same. You can try and expand the rules to allow other players with different based armies to try the rules, but make sure the old armies can still be used with your updated set of rules. Allowing the use of an older army list is also a very good idea. There is no need to update army lists. Other areas which you should retain is the core combat system. If the old rules use a d6, stay with the d6. If the old rules use a bucket of dice system, stay with that. If it uses a casualty and reaction test system, retain that. Many players like rules because of the combat system. As a result, it's best to retain that as much as possible. There may be other unique aspects of the rules which gamers like morale grouping. The idea of giving all elements a skirmish capability are some as well. But there may be more. Identifying what should be retained can be subjective, and it's a bit of an art, but try and keep as much of the unique flavour of the old rules as possible without loading it down with busy work. In conclusion, updating a set of rules will require you to write a new set of rules, that's a given, but they must retain the core design objectives of the rules you are updating. If you're not doing that and you're creating a whole new set of rules, then why bother even pretend you're updating? Why not simply start from scratch? The clue why you may not wish to create a whole new set of rules is older players who may have fond memories of the old set of rules, which could even include yourself. I know of many ancient figure gamers who still have fond memories of WRG 6th edition. I even see a very rare game being played, but I have to admit it's like really rare. There is a reason why WRG came out with the not so popular 7th edition, and luckily at the same time the very popular DBA. This was then followed up by the reasonably popular DBM and finally DBMM. These reasons will not go away, but revamping and updating an older set of rules may allow gamers to give it a shot again, as it allows them to go down memory lane while having a game which is far more aligned with modern expectations. My current project, which is underway, is updating the old WRG Wargames rules 1685 to 1845, which is progressing after, I can tell you now, many false starts. In addition to this, I've always wanted to try and update the old WRG Wargamers rules, 1925 to 1950, and may have some, and actually have attempted this a few times unsuccessfully, but I suspect I'll not bother in the end unless I get possessed with a passion to bring these rules back to life. Empire 3rd Edition is another set of rules which I've attempted several times to revamp. In the end, I created a very different set of rules which retain the aspect of these rules, which I really like. But I rarely use those rules, as one change which has occurred in the last 30 to 40 years is the move to simplification. An upgraded version of 3rd edition was always going to contain far too much complexity for it to be a popular, good, irregular ad hoc gaming set of rules. Another option which I may try is to update the WRG 6th edition. However, as with the old WRG Wargamers rules, 1925 to 1950, I suspect this will only occur if I'm possessed by an unnatural desire to do so. One other set of ancient rules I used to play occasionally was Anabasis, so that may be another option for me to try again, or to try to update, and probably is a simpler and more viable project than WRG 6th edition. However, after doing this, that is updating old rules a few times, I've come to the realization no update of an old set of rules will ever really gain much traction, apart from nostalgia. Back in the 1970s and 1980s, the focus for figure gaming was very different than today. Back in the day, it was all about competition game, where you command an unnaturally small force mix. DBA is likely the ultimate expression of this objective. Today, the focus is very different. Experienced players want to command larger force mixes and reproduce entire battles, while new players tend to flock to skirmish rules. Competitions are not as common, although I must admit they do exist, especially in the Ancients area. Some rules simply do not need any updates. The excellent or exceptional spearhead is as fresh today as it was in 1995. However, these are much more modern than the rules I've covered so far, so that could be a reason for it. Another set of rules which came out in the 1990s, which still retains its popularity today, is DBA. And while it's been updated and it's in 3rd version, it's still much the same basic game. I doubt these rules will ever need any form of update, apart from incremental improvement, as has occurred in the last 30 years. So, in conclusion, if you wish to update an old set of rules, ensure the following is true. The rules actually need an update. You understand why you want to update it. Focus on updating game systems, speeding up gameplay, and retaining the basic combat system. Retain the original core objective, which generally means keep the game scale as it is, and ensure old force mixers can use the rules using old army lists. The final section of this video is the methodology I use to revamp or upgrade old rules. I make no claim this is the only way or even the best way, but it's a methodology which has worked for me several times. I learned this methodology after many failures and wasted efforts. Nothing discourages a designer more than spending a lot of time doing something and then realizing it was not going to work and having to restart it right at the beginning again. The first step is to create what I call a version 1 of the rules. This will be the original rules which will be reformatted into a case system or some equivalent system, adding as much cross-referencing as possible. This step is required to ensure you have a base document to work with and you fully understand the rules. If you're a regular player and fully understand the rules, you can skip this step. But if that was the case, why are you even trying to upgrade the rules? It is very unlikely just reformatting the rules and adding a case system is all you need to freshen up your old rules. You'll probably need to rework the charts and tables and create a new cheat sheet in order to speed up play or make play easier, and maybe that will be sufficient to breathe new life into your set of rules. However, from experience, even that additional step is unlikely to be enough. The next step is to do an initial minimalistic upgrade. This could include expanding the basing so other force mixers can use the rules, changing the distances into a base width system, or any other obvious and easy improvement that simplifies and speeds up gameplay. It's important to not change any of the basic game systems, as once you start doing that, it's a very big job and you can never go back. Let's just do this byte by byte. This step may even result in a set of rules which is updated as much as you wish to go. It is not impossible that just doing these minimal changes will make your old set of rules good enough to move forward with. This is not impossible and maybe a good point to stop unless you wish to continue your updating process. If you wish to proceed to the third step, or what I call version 3 of the rules, then it's time to update the game system and speed up play. After the first 2 versions, you should have a very firm grasp of the basic game objectives, so of the original rules, and are aware what needs to stay and what needs to go, or can go. The next step is to deal with scenarios, perhaps historical or some form of ad hoc scenario system. Now you need to move to playtesting. While your new game system will need to be tested, often the playtesting process will allow you to edit your rules as well, or even correct errors. The holy grail is to create a set of rules which anyone can pick up, learn the rules, and have a game. Many homegrown sets of rules have so many unanswered questions in them, new players find it hard to have a game with them. So, lots of playtesting and rules updating will allow you to clean up the rules to ensure you don't have this particular problem. Another useful technique which I've used is to create an examples document, detailed in diagram form how to perform the various game systems required in the rules. This also assists you in finding issues and in editing problems in the rules which you can quickly resolve at this point. Unfortunately, it is a lot of work. While it's highly unlikely any upgraded or revamped set of rules, of an old set of rules, will ever be picked up by many new players, the old-timers will likely be interested in reading them, which in turn may give them the incentive to try the old rules again, or even try your rules. As I've indicated before in the video, I've actually done this a few times, and I've gone down this path at least 3 times. My first attempt was to upgrade and complete the old Wargamers Digest World War II Platoon Elements Scale set of rules. I call this KRIEGSSPIEL Zusammenfassung, and in this case I retained all the game systems that existed from the magazine and simply filled in the gaps, of which there was a lot. The original rules, contained in the Wargamers magazine and printed between 1973 and 1975, are also contained in the rules I created. I had a lot of fun trying these rules out in the early 1970s with my Airfix 172 models, and it was a real trip down memory lane when I went through the rules and gave it a few games. My next attempt was to update the Core Commander rules by Bruce Taylor, which I have already mentioned. I attempted this twice, with version 5.5 being my first attempt at a complete rewrite. In this case, I did not simplify the rules and just attempted to speed up gameplay, which worked, but it was not enough to really make a difference. In my second attempt, which ended up being version 6.1, it was far more successful as I dramatically simplified the game system used, which required a total rewrite of the rules. Once again, gamers who remember the old Core Commander would likely find these rules of interest, but for new players there are many other more recent and good rules to choose from, and while I've made them a lot simpler than the old or original ones, they're still unusually complex. My third attempt to update old rules was to update the old WRG Wargamer Rules 1685 to 1845 by Phil Barker and Bob O'Brien, which I call KRIEGSSPIEL 1685 to 1845. This is a project which is still in progress as of the creation of this video, but most of the updating work has been done. I just need to playtest it and proofread the rules. Once again, this ended up being a total rewrite of the rules with a major focus on simplification and speeding up gameplay. Once again, I suspect this would only be of interest to old-timer gamers who had fond memories of the original WRG rules. For those interested, all the World War II rules are in the file section of Schwerpunkt.io group site and the Napoleonic rules in the Großschlachten.io group site. For those not interested in joining IO group, I will also leave direct links in the comment section. I must admit I don't update these rules because I didn't update these rules because I hope it would start a new wave of interest in the older rules. It's more of a personal interest and to help me go down or to take a trip down memory lane and I do have fond memories of these old rules, I have to admit. And so this concludes episode 74 of my video on game system design, in this case looking at updating old set of rules. Alle guten Ding, kommen zu einem Ende.